I've always known I wasn't the favorite child. It's one of those truths you feel in your bones before you have the words to articulate it. My name is Stella. I'm 25 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've watched my brother James exist in a completely different universe than mine, one where money flows freely, mistakes are forgiven instantly, and love doesn't come with a price tag. Growing up, I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe every family had dynamics I didn't understand. But as the years passed, the evidence became impossible to ignore. James got a car for his 16th birthday, a shiny blue Honda that sat in our driveway like a monument to favoritism. I got a card with $50 and a reminder that I could start saving for my own vehicle. When James wanted to study abroad in Spain, our parents wrote the check without blinking. When I asked about a summer program in France, they handed me job applications and told me about the value of earning your own way. The thing is, I believed them. I internalized every lesson about independence and self-reliance. I got my first job at 14, babysitting the neighbor's kids. By 16, I was working 20 hours a week at a local bookstore while maintaining straight A's. I saved every penny I could, telling myself that this was making me stronger, better, more prepared for the real world. James, meanwhile, floated through life on a cushion of parental support. Failed a class? Dad would call the school. Crashed the Honda? Insurance covered it, and Mom drove him around until the new car arrived. Lost his job? Well, he could move back home rent-free until he figured things out. But here's where the story takes its first cruel turn. When I turned 18 and graduated high school with honors, my parents sat me down for what they called a reality check conversation. They pulled out a ledger, an actual physical ledger, and showed me all the costs I had incurred living in their house. Food, utilities, my share of the mortgage. They called it back rent, and the total came to just over $10,000. I remember staring at that number, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. But James never had to pay this, I said, my voice barely a whisper. My mother's response haunts me to this day. James is different. He needs more support. You've always been so capable, Stella. We knew you could handle it. That conversation happened 7 years ago, but it set the tone for everything that followed. I went to college on scholarships and loans while working 30 hours a week. Every month, I sent my parents $200 toward that back rent, even when it meant choosing between textbooks and groceries. James went to the same university, his tuition fully paid, living in an apartment our parents co-signed for, with a monthly allowance that exceeded my entire income. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting. I'd chosen the field partly because I was good with numbers, but mostly because I needed to understand money, how it worked, how it moved, how some people seemed to have endless supplies while others scraped by. At my graduation, my parents took photos with James, who had barely scraped through with a business degree. In every picture, he stands between them, their golden boy, while I hover at the edge of the frame. The job market was brutal, but I landed a position at a small firm 3 months after graduation. The salary wasn't much, but it was mine. I found a studio apartment in a rough part of town, furnished it with thrift store finds, and continued sending those monthly payments home. By then, the ritual had become so ingrained that I barely questioned it anymore. Meanwhile, James decided to find himself through travel. Our parents funded a 6-month journey through Europe, calling it an investment in his personal growth. He sent back Instagram photos from Paris, Rome, Barcelona, all the places I dreamed of visiting but couldn't afford. In one photo, he stood in front of the Eiffel Tower with a caption that read, "Grateful for parents who believe in following your dreams." I liked the photo. What else could I do? It was around this time that I met Maddox. He worked in IT at a company that shared our office building, and we'd started talking in the coffee shop downstairs. Maddox had this way of really seeing me, of asking questions that went deeper than surface-level pleasantries. When I mentioned my family situation, carefully, tentatively, he didn't immediately jump to their defense or tell me I was overreacting. "That sounds really hard," he said simply. "You deserve better than that." Those 5 words cracked something open in me. For the first time, someone was validating what I'd felt but never dared to fully acknowledge, that the way my parents treated me wasn't normal, wasn't fair, wasn't love in any form I wanted to accept. Maddox and I had been dating for about 6 months when the cruise announcement came. It was a Sunday dinner at my parents' house, one of those mandatory family gatherings where absence required a doctor's note or death certificate. James was there, of course, fresh from his latest career pivot that had mysteriously failed after 3 weeks. He was living in our parents' basement again, though they called it the guest suite now. "We have exciting news," my mother announced, clapping her hands together like a game show host. "We're taking a family cruise to the Caribbean this Christmas." James whooped and immediately started talking about how much he needed a vacation after his stressful year. I sat quietly, already calculating the cost in my head. These family vacations always work the same way. Our parents would pay for James entirely while expecting me to cover my own way as a lesson in financial responsibility. "The tickets are already booked," my father added, sliding a brochure across the table to me. "Your portion comes to $3,200. We got you an interior cabin to help save costs. I looked at the glossy pages showing happy families lounging by pools and dining at elaborate buffets. Then I noticed something. This says the suites start at $8,000. Are you and Mom in a suite? Well, yes, my mother said. And James will be staying with us. You know he gets seasick in the small cabins. That old familiar feeling rose in my chest, the mixture of hurt and anger that I'd learned to swallow like bitter medicine. But this time, with Maddox's words echoing in my mind, something shifted. I heard myself speak before I'd fully decided to. I won't be going. The silence that followed was deafening. James actually laughed, thinking I was joking. My mother's face went through several expressions before settling on injured disappointment. My father just shook his head. You can't be serious, my mother said. This is a family vacation. Family. Stella. Family, I repeated, the word tasting strange in my mouth. Right. The family where I pay back rent from birth while James lives free. The family where I'm expected to fund my own vacation while sitting in the cheapest cabin. That family? You're being dramatic, my father said, his voice taking on that edge that used to make me immediately backtrack and apologize. But I didn't apologize. Instead, I stood up, gathered my things, and said, I'm being honest. And honestly, I'm tired of pretending this is normal. The fallout from that dinner was swift and brutal. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my parents, ranging from guilt trips to outright anger. My mother's texts were novels about how I was destroying the family, how ungrateful I was after everything they'd done for me. My father's were shorter, more cutting. Disappointment doesn't begin to cover it. James, surprisingly, reached out too. His message was almost funny in its complete lack of self-awareness. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. It's just a cruise. Mom and Dad are really hurt. I showed the messages to Maddox one evening as we sat in his apartment, a space that had become my refuge from the storm. He read through them carefully, his jaw tightening with each swipe. You know what strikes me? He said finally. Not one of these messages asks how you're feeling. Not one acknowledges your perspective. It's all about them. He was right. Every message centered on their hurt, their disappointment, their needs. It was as if I existed only as a supporting character in their story, and I'd suddenly gone off script. I decided to write one final message to the group chat my mother had created called Family Cruise Planning. The exclamation point was hers, naturally. I've spent 7 years paying back a debt that was never real, while watching James receive unconditional support. I've accepted being treated as less than, as someone who has to earn what others receive freely. I'm done with that. I love you all, but I need to step back and figure out what healthy love actually looks like. I hope you enjoy the cruise. Then I did something I'd never done before. I muted the conversation. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in my life, their reactions, their anger, their disappointment, none of it could reach me immediately. I had created space between their emotions and my reality. Maddox held me that night as I cried, not from sadness exactly, but from the release of a weight I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. You're the strongest person I know, he whispered into my hair. And you deserve to be celebrated for it, not punished. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away when Maddox made the suggestion that would change everything. We were cooking dinner together in his apartment. A simple pasta dish that felt like a feast because we were making it together, with no one keeping score of who paid for what ingredient. My mom called today, he said, stirring the sauce with unusual focus. She wanted to know if you'd be joining us for Thanksgiving. I froze, a piece of garlic bread halfway to my mouth. I'd met Maddox's parents a few times. Lovely people who seemed genuinely interested in my work, my thoughts, my existence as a whole person. But Thanksgiving felt big, important, like a statement. She said, "You're always welcome," Maddox continued, finally looking at me. No pressure, but I'd love to have you there. They would too. The contrast hit me like a physical force. My own mother hadn't even asked if I was coming to their Thanksgiving. She'd simply sent a terse message with the time and a reminder to bring the green bean casserole, the dish I'd been assigned years ago and was never allowed to deviate from. What would I bring? I asked Maddox, and something in my voice must have revealed more than I intended because he put down the spoon and pulled me into a hug. Yourself, he said simply. Just yourself. That's more than enough. I said yes to Maddox's invitation and sent my parents a polite message declining theirs. The response was predictable. More guilt, more accusations of destroying family traditions. James even chimed in with a manipulative gem. Guess I'll have to eat your share of Mom's turkey. Someone has to maintain traditions. But as Thanksgiving approached, I found myself feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. I actually looked forward to the holiday instead of dreading it like a dental appointment. The day itself was a revelation. Maddox's family lived in a modest 2-story house about an hour away, with a garden his mother tended and a workshop where his father built furniture. When we arrived, his mother, Linda, hugged me like I was already family. His father, Robert, immediately enlisted my help with testing the turkey temperature, declaring that anyone who works with numbers must be precise about cooking temperatures. That Thanksgiving dinner exists in my memory like a scene from someone else's life, someone who is loved and valued just for existing. Maddox's younger sister, Emma, peppered me with questions about my job, genuinely fascinated by accounting of all things. His parents shared embarrassing stories about Maddox's childhood, including him in the gentle roasting. But there was so much warmth underneath it all. When Linda brought out the turkey, she paused before carving. "We like to go around the table and share what we're grateful for," she said. "It's cheesy, but it's tradition." "Maddox, why don't you start?" Maddox looked at me as he spoke. "I'm grateful for new perspectives, for people who show us different ways of being in the world, and for Stella, who makes every day better just by being herself." I had to blink back tears. When it was my turn, I managed to say, "I'm grateful for being welcomed, for kindness without conditions, and for discovering what family can really feel like." Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're always welcome here, honey. Always." Meanwhile, my phone sat silent in my purse. I'd turned off notifications from my family's group chat, but I'd checked it once that morning. There were photos of their Thanksgiving, James prominently featured in every shot, my absence seemingly unnoticed or at least unmentioned. The green bean casserole was conspicuously missing from the spread, but sitting at Maddox's family's table, laughing at Robert's terrible turkey jokes and helping Emma with her college application essays, I realized something profound. I hadn't lost a family. I'd gained the possibility of a real one. After dinner, while helping Linda with dishes, she said something that stayed with me. "Maddox told us a bit about your situation with your parents. I hope that's okay." I tensed, waiting for the judgment or the well-meaning advice to reconcile. Instead, she said, "Sometimes the families we're born into aren't the ones that nurture us best. It takes courage to recognize that and even more courage to seek out something healthier. I'm proud of you, and we've only just really met." I did cry then, standing in their warm kitchen with my hands covered in soap suds. Linda just hugged me, getting her nice sweater wet, and didn't let go until I was ready. The cruise happened without me, of course. James documented every moment on social media with the thoroughness of a travel blogger. Sunset selfies, elaborate dinner spreads, videos of my parents dancing to a Caribbean band. In one photo, my parents stood with James between them at the ship's formal dinner, all three in elegant attire. The caption read, "Perfect family night." I studied that photo longer than I should have. Looking for what? Evidence of my absence being felt? Some sign that the family portrait was incomplete? But they looked perfectly content, their golden triangle intact. Maddox found me staring at my phone and gently took it from my hands. "How are you feeling about it?" "I thought I'd feel vindicated," I admitted, like they'd realized something was missing. Instead, I just feel free. "Is that wrong?" "It's the most right thing I've heard," he said. It was during this time that I made a decision about the back rent. I had about $2,000 left to pay, according to my calculations. Not that my parents had ever provided an official accounting. Part of me wanted to stop the payments entirely, to match their lack of acknowledgement with my own form of silence. But that felt like stooping to their level. Instead, I wrote a check for the full amount and mailed it with a certified letter. The letter was brief. "This payment concludes any financial obligations between us. I've paid back the $10,000 in back rent from my childhood. I consider this debt, which should never have existed, closed. Going forward, our relationship will need to be built on mutual respect and equal treatment, not financial manipulation and favoritism. I hope we can find a way forward, but it will not be on the old terms." The certified mail receipt came back signed by my father. No personal response, no acknowledgement of the letter's contents. Just a signature on a green card that I filed away with my other important documents, the paper trail of my independence. Maddox's family invited me to their New Year's Eve party. It was small, intimate, just family and close friends. When midnight came and Maddox kissed me, his mother snapped a photo that she later printed and framed for us. In it, we're both laughing, surrounded by people who chose to include me in their celebration. It sits on our bookshelf now, a reminder of what joy without conditions looks like. January brought unexpected contact from my parents. Not an apology or an acknowledgement, but an invitation to James's birthday dinner. The message from my mother was carefully worded, as if nothing had happened. James's 28th birthday is on the 15th. Dinner at Romano's at 7 p.m. Hope you can make it. Romano's was the expensive Italian place they'd taken James for every birthday since he was 16. I'd gotten my birthdays at the local Chinese buffet until I turned 18, then they expected me to plan my own celebrations. The disparity was so obvious it had become almost comical. I decided to go. Not out of obligation or hope for change, but from a place of curiosity. I wanted to see if I could maintain my boundaries while still being present. Maddox offered to come with me, but I felt like this was something I needed to do alone. The dinner was exactly what I expected and somehow worse. They'd rented a private room. James opened presents that included a new laptop from our parents for his new business venture, though no one could quite explain what that venture was. When the check came, my father smoothly picked it up, waving off my offered credit card with, "It's James's special day." "Every day is James's special day," I said quietly, but clearly enough to be heard. The table went silent. James actually looked uncomfortable for once. shifting in his seat like he'd finally noticed the elephant in the room. "Stella," my mother started, her voice taking on that warning tone I knew so well. "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with my calm. "I came here to try, but I can't pretend anymore. James, I don't blame you for taking what's offered. But Mom, Dad, you've created such an imbalance in this family that we don't even feel like siblings anymore. We're not equals. We never have been. You've always been jealous," my father said coldly. "We gave you what you needed. You gave me bills," I replied. "You gave me debt for existing. You gave James everything else. And you know what? I survived it. I thrived despite it. But I'm done pretending it was love." I stood up, placed a card on the table for James, because despite everything, he was still my brother, and walked out. The aftermath of James's birthday dinner created an unexpected shift. James, of all people, reached out to me a week later. Not through text, but actually calling, which was unprecedented. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Like, really talk? We met at a neutral coffee shop. James looked different somehow. Older, maybe, or just more aware. He fiddled with his coffee cup for a full minute before speaking. "I never realized," he started, then stopped. "No, that's not true. I realized, but I didn't want to see it. The back rent thing. They really made you pay that?" "Every month for 7 years," I confirmed. His face went through several expressions. "That's fucked up, Stella. That's really fucked up." It was the first time James had ever acknowledged the disparity. We talked for 2 hours. He admitted he'd assumed I was just bad with money when I couldn't afford things. He'd never questioned why our parents' support flowed so freely to him and not to me. The conversation didn't fix everything. Years of imbalance couldn't be erased with one coffee shop confession, but it was a start. "I can't give back what I've taken," he said finally. "But I can stop taking. I'm 28. It's time I figured my shit out." Whether he would follow through remained to be seen, but the acknowledgement itself felt like a small victory. Meanwhile, my relationship with Maddox deepened. His family had essentially adopted me. Linda called me weekly just to chat. Robert asked my opinion on furniture designs. Emma sent me her college essays to review. They included me, not as Maddox's girlfriend, but as myself, Stella, who brought homemade desserts and had opinions about tax law and laughed too loudly at bad jokes. One evening, as Maddox and I cooked dinner together in what had become our routine, he said something that stopped me in my tracks. "My lease is up in 3 months, he mentioned casually. Too casually. I was thinking about looking for a new place, maybe a 2-bedroom. Somewhere with space for a home office. For both of us. The invitation hung in the air between us. Living together. Building something intentional and equal. A home where no one kept score, where love didn't come with invoices." "Yes," I said, not needing to think about it. "Yes, let's do that." 6 months have passed since that conversation in the kitchen. Maddox and I found a small 2-bedroom apartment with good light and a kitchen big enough for 2 people to cook without bumping into each other. We split everything equally. Not because anyone's keeping track, but because partnership means sharing both the burdens and the joys. My relationship with my parents exists now in careful, measured doses. We exchange polite texts on holidays. I send cards for birthdays. They've stopped asking when I'll come to my senses and return to the fold. I think they've finally realized that I have come to my senses, just not in the way they expected. James actually did follow through on his promise to change. He got a job, a real one that he's kept for 6 months now. He moved out of our parents' basement into a shared apartment with roommates. He's struggling with independence in a way I recognize from my own early years, but he's trying. We text sometimes, sharing small victories and frustrations. We're building something new, slowly, carefully, a sibling relationship based on who we are now, not who we were forced to be. Last week, Maddox and I had dinner with his parents to celebrate Linda's birthday. As we sat around their dining table, Robert raised his glass for a toast. "To family," he said, looking directly at me. "Both the ones we're born into and the ones we choose." I've thought a lot about that toast. About the family I was born into, with their ledgers and conditions and golden child dynamics. And about the family I'm choosing, Maddox, his parents, the found family of friends who've supported me through this journey. Even James, in this new, more honest form. The truth is, I don't hate my parents. I understand them better now. They gave what they could, even if it was packaged in dysfunction and favoritism. They loved in the only way they knew how. Even if that love left scars I'm still healing. But understanding doesn't mean accepting treatment that diminishes me. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the lessons learned from pain. Maddox asked me the other night what I want for our future. I told him I want a home where love is freely given, where children, if we have them, never have to earn their place at the table. I want holiday dinners where everyone brings something but no one's keeping track of who spent what. I want the kind of family photos where everyone's genuinely smiling, not performing their assigned roles. "I want that too," he said. And then, almost casually, "I've been looking at rings." My heart stopped, then restarted at double speed. Yeah, nothing fancy. Something simple and real. Like us. As I write this, I'm sitting in our apartment, our home, while Maddox makes coffee in the kitchen. The morning light streams through windows we picked together, falling on furniture we assembled as a team, usually laughing at the unclear instructions. My phone is quiet. There are no demanding texts, no guilt trips, no reminders of debts that were never mine to pay. I've learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choosing to show up for each other without keeping score. It's about love that multiplies rather than divides. It's about building something new from the ashes of what didn't work, and having the courage to believe you deserve better. My parents always said I was too independent, too difficult, too unwilling to just go along with family traditions. They were right. I am all of those things, and those things saved me. They led me here, to this quiet morning in a small apartment, with a man who sees my strength as something to celebrate, not something to punish. The golden child and the scapegoat. It's an old story, as old as families themselves. But here's what they don't tell you in those old stories. The scapegoat can walk away. They can build something better. They can choose their own gold, forge their own crown, write their own ending. This is mine. And it's only the beginning.